Hello, everybody, and welcome to North Grenville Writers Circle Presents. I'm sitting with Michel Weatherall today to talk about the recent publication of Love Catastrophe, a collection of local Ottawa and area poets who address the loves and losses during the catastrophes of 2020. Welcome, Michel. It's great to meet virtual with you here today for our very first interview.
Awesome. It's always fun to be here.
Yeah, well, it's not our first meet. We had 29th February before the pandemic. I kind of think it's really interesting because that was the first and the last time that local and regional authors got together. So that's where I met the mayor, it's where I met you, and now we've been online for, over a year, and we've at least had the chance to meet, which is great. And of course, I know you through Jen Preddy and your work with some of the other local authors here. So recently on our Facebook group, a couple of authors have been wondering about how to do something, and I thank you very much for stepping in to do interviews and to provide ideas on publications. So we'll start there. And awesome. I want to congratulate Broken Keys Publishing, for winning the 2021 Faces of Ottawa for book for Thin Places, Ottawa Anthology, Best Author, and Favorite Publisher. When I saw that came out, because I run the North Grenville Community Response page, I was finding all of the companies and businesses and service providers in our area in North Grenville to post it on our COVID site. And when I saw yours for all these different categories, I'm going, how is that possible? So congratulations. How is that? That must have been pretty rewarding, eh?
I was a little bit floored when I saw that, to be honest with you. I was taken aback.
And you had won in previous years, but not at, it just kept coming.
I was really taken back with the Thin Places 2021 Book of the Year, only because launching a book in the middle of a pandemic is, at the best of times, ridiculously hard. Yeah. And there was a lot of challenges in doing that, trying to get it. Was never any official launch, but no, I was happy to see that. It's a good thing. I mean, I do think that ties into I've always said, and I've always believed that Ottawa has a ridiculous amount of talent in it. It's just a matter of tapping into that and getting it out there. And I think that's testament to that.
I think you're right. Like if you're like, I talk to my writer circle about whatever genre you are, try to find an association or a group where you can ask questions that they might be familiar with. For example, we have all genres, fiction, nonfiction in our group, but we don't have people who are like experts in children's books and how to get them into the different places. So Ottawa has, like, I don't know how many writers groups they have. They have Canadian Crime Writers of Canada, I belong to. They have Ottawa Writes. There's so many there. And I think getting people together, like the festival we had in North Grenville, in the future would be really great, a really great experience for them. I assume you're the same way. You've been meeting new authors over the years, as through festivals, associations, what have you.
The more the better. I mean, one of the big things I like about with independent authors, or even traditionally published authors, especially when you get local authors, is some people have this erroneous mindset that you're in competition with one another, and you're not. I mean, any one person's success is everybody's success by definition. It has to be, and it is. And I think that's the best way to move forward. And that's one of the reasons why with Broken Keys Publishing, the Arise events, or the Arise features, which is what Thin Places was, as well as Love Catastrophe poetry, is it promotes these, it spotlights local authors and local talents. And it's what I like so much about them is it's clean across from well-established award-winning authors or poets to first time in print I love that scale of that thing. When you get that kind of gamut, it's fantastic because you get cross-pollination going, you get a mixture of the styles of writing, you get a mixture of genres in there, and that's the kind of stuff we need more of, I think.
I think so too, especially because writers, when they first start out, they can get the imposter syndrome, like, can I really write? But if they're hanging out with other authors and published authors, then they're in a group, they're going to be supported, and then they're going to pass it on to the people coming up behind them, right?
That's right. That's one of the biggest things is I've been invited to speak at a lot of smaller, well, I shouldn't say smaller, from amateur to professional writing groups. And what struck me the most is the level of talent that's there, and especially for the people that never been published, or they're right at that cusp, ready to go over. It's scary, and I'll be the first one to admit the same thing. I'm terrified of it. Every time I release something, I might put on a good poker face, but the reality of it, it is scary to step out into the public light. It really is, because you're going to get critiques, you're going to get fans, you're going to get good stuff, you're going to get bad stuff. Have thick skin, but that first step is a critical step. And it's the one where I think a lot of people, myself included, we are our own worst critics. We think it's no good. We think all these horrible things. And when our imaginations runs wild in its own, we always imagine the worst case scenarios. And the reality of it, that never ends up being what happens. It never is. We got to
And
be more positive on ourselves.
oh, for sure. And I think understanding that every writer's going to have their own way of writing, like
Yeah,
the authors that have come in to speak to us, one of them says, I don't edit as I go. I finish the book. You
that's right.
know, he finishes the book. He doesn't worry about it. That's going to happen later, but you got to get down the bones.
That's right.
Other
That's right.
ones I've met, like Terry Follis, they have to write an outline more than anybody. He says he's the biggest outliner among all his peers when I met him at the Gananoque Writers Festival. And so it's interesting, there is no one way to write. You can't come to a writer's circle and go, is this okay? And it's like, does it work for you? You know,
Yeah, no, that's exactly it.
Tell,
Because anyway, you end up becoming something you're not if you try to mimic a different process. I mean, I'm a firm believer of letting that creative seed in you run its course. I always refer to as that inner child within. Let it jump and run mud puddles. Let it splash in the rains. Play with toys. Don't ever stifle that, because there's too many people I see that walk around the world. They're zombies. They're dead on the inside, and it's that creative spark that's where it comes from. And I find, I mean, I can't speak for anybody or everybody else, but I know for myself, the biggest creativities are when I'm in the middle of a project and suddenly it takes on a life of its own, and this idea comes out of frickin' nowhere, and you have to let it run its course. You really do. I mean, you do have to, at some point you have to start doing the editing and the cleaning up, and there is a more technical aspect down the road, but that creative aspect should never be tampered with. It should just be let run.
and you say that, and it reminds me of authors, Jen Gilroy, Mike Martin. They say, it's not so much what I'm writing; it's what the characters tell me to do.
Yeah,
So that's
yeah,
kind of in line with that for the fiction writing. And for me, I want to use like I'll be in the shower and I'll think of something that happened that was funny, and
yeah,
then I'll like, can I put that in? I have actually a binder. And I have ideas in my binder, and I have ideas for books, and I also have ideas for scenes. And
yeah,
whenever I think of something, I put it in there. And then if I ever have writer's block, I can just pull it out.
yeah,
Is my
yeah.
thought. But one of the things for people who have been like business writers, the hardest thing for me was to not, you want to be very concise on your words, and you want to, not use jargon, not use flowery language. And then when I started writing for fiction, it's like, you've got to use, language that puts people in the scene when they're reading your work.
Well, I mean, I think that's reflected best when we see in plays or even TV shows or movies, when you see good writing, especially in dialogue. I mean, the most relevant thing I can think of right now it's on Disney Plus is Loki, the new MCU series. That dialogue between Loki and Mobius, or Owen Wilson, is fantastic, and it's because it's so well written. It's that exchange. It's that is the life of stuff, and that's where the characters leap off the page when you start writing at that level, and there's a chemistry there, and it's really important to actually let it run its course.
Now, before we go into your latest release, I'm curious, how can you choose two genres? One's horror and one's poetry. I mean, where's the connection there? Like what inspired you to write the horror, and what inspired you to write poetry?
Well,
I think poetry, maybe you've explained it. You're called to be creative, maybe to let things out, but maybe some more on horror. Like, what inspired that?
what's interesting with that is most of the symbiote series itself, I would describe it more technically as weird fiction, but it's a genre a lot of people don't recognize. Weird fiction has elements of sci-fi, fantasy, and horror in it. I never liked horror so much because in today with the literature and movies, horror tends to be slasher, gore, shock, and I really think it needs to be a bit more cerebral than that. But what I liked about the genre of weird fiction, and it came into its own about the 20s and 30s, was it actually predated, the writers in it predated the publishing houses categories of genres. So when they wrote, they just wrote. And what I like so much about that is there's a purity to that, because if you wake up tomorrow morning, or if I wake up tomorrow morning, I decide I'm going to be a romance writer. So I've already pigeonholed myself into writing romance as opposed to just writing. And if once that's out, and if people are out there, or publishing houses or whatever, they want to categorize it, well, they're free to do that. Fill your boots if that's what makes them happy. But I think walking into the process with the mindset of this is what I'm going to write and this is what kind of writer I am, you've already inhibited yourself. If you just write, just let it go, write a story. It doesn't have to be, if somebody wants to put it in that category, they can, but they don't, you as a writer don't need to do that.
And then when you're finished writing it, would you go back and put in some of the expectations of the genre?
No.
No?
No.
Okay.
No.
So it's more mainstream fiction then. It probably, yeah.
I mean, it has to be cast, it has to be in that little unfortunate clip in the back cover where the ISBN number is. They usually want something that says what genre it is. So you're stuck trying to pigeonhole it into something. But at that point, it's already written. It's done. So, that's how I approach that. To try to answer your question about how you get that genre, I don't specifically focus on that. I just, like, I'll be honest with you, in the first book of the new series, Fractures, Naro's Journey, I would classify that more as an action adventure, even though it still fits in that weird fiction horror genre. It's still, there's a lot more action and adventure in it, and it brings a different feel to it.
That's interesting. It sounds like you can have flexibility in what you write.
But you should. I think you should.
And yet, when somebody reads your books, they probably go, "Yeah, that's like a Michel Weatherall's book, right?" But yet, yeah, that's interesting. Okay, very good.
I mean, and to segue that into your topic about how do you do horror and poetry, the first collection of poetry that I released myself was called A Dark Corner of My Soul. And it was a collection of poems, but they are not sunshine and lollipops. They come from a very dark place. And I've had some people complain about that, but at the end of the day, I think the beautiful thing about poetry is it's meant to make you feel. It doesn't have to make you feel good, doesn't have to make you feel happy or lovey, but it has to make you feel. And it could be anything across those. And in this particular example, with that first collection, they were significantly darker pieces. But they don't all have to be like, you can have sunshine and lollipops. You absolutely can. I mean, traditionally, that's how poetry is seen anyway, right?
Yeah, interesting. And so it just makes me think, when you have a fan following and people that like your work, does their feedback through reviews do anything to inspire you to write on the next thing, or it's all creative and
kind of in a way, but a lot of the stuff, a lot of feedback I get back is either directly messaged or emailed to me. So I hear it firsthand, and it's, you get the good and you get the bad. You get some people that are happy, or I think one of the biggest outpourings I got was when the last book, when I finished off the Symbiote series, is the ending is, a lot of people weren't happy with it because it's not a happy ending. It wraps up the whole series in kind of a bleak way. But my response to that one is, anybody that's read the series, or if you sit back and think it through what's going on, I kind of sit there and say, where did you think this was going to go? Like, how did you really think this was going to play out? But what's interesting with a lot of that too is, and as for does it affect me, it does in a way. One of the things, believe it or not, in the latest full novel I released was Naro's Journey. And I love hybrid words. Sojourning is one of them. I think the word sojourn and the word journey should be a word in itself. It isn't. And I've had people give me a hard time over that. Just go to town over, well, you're making up words. It's not real. Like motel, like hangry. These are awesome words. They describe paragraphs worth of description in a single word. And I love that kind of stuff. But one of the things that in 2020, the beginning of 2020, the first title I released that wasn't my own title was called Symphonies of Horror. It's a collection of H.P. Lovecraft's work. But the subtitle of it was, and I debated, it was meant as an appendix to the Symbiote series, because the Symbiote series is built into a Lovecraftian world. You don't need to know Lovecraft's material to understand it or read it, but there are references and some people are interested. So it's a bonus book in the box set, and it's actually Lovecraft's works themselves that relate to it, if anybody wants to pursue it. But because some people had complained about these hybrid words, I figured I almost took the angle of how do you like me now? Because one of the subtitles in it was the symbiote appendum. And I used the word, I know the word appendum is not a word, but it wasn't appendix. And it wasn't, what's the other word I'm looking for? I'm drawing a blank.
I had it a second ago.
But I thought appendum was perfect. And I know it's not a word. And even in the introduction to it in the book, it's kind of a nod to, for those of you out there that had a problem with Snarl Sojourning, this one's for you. But so, yeah, sometimes feedback does find its way in. But for the most part, no.
I get the impression the most important thing is to take the reader on a journey.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
The least likely way they thought they would go, the more successful I think it's been. If I bring them to places that they didn't see coming, my job is done.
Right on, right on. So let's move into talk about Broken Keys very quickly before we move into to the book release. What inspired you to start Broken Keys Publishing?
Well, the first novel that actually released was The Symbiote, and that was actually written like close to 35 years ago. And I mean, I could have just published under my own name, self-published, but it was just, maybe it's that creative aspect of myself. It was another opportunity to come up with another name and another artwork or whatever. But I just decided with Broken Keys Publishing, and it was just a name to publish my own work with. And then down the road, I wanted to do more with that. And as the opportunities presented themselves, I'm slowly starting to move in that direction. But another big thing that it's still with me to this day is I have a background in the print industry, and going on to 35 years in the print industry. Although printing and publishing is not the same creature, there are crossovers between them. And I've seen so many times where people were misled. They didn't know how they go about things, and be blatantly honest, taken advantage of by various companies that it drives me crazy. There's no need for it. And that's one of the things with Broken Keys Publishing, especially with the Arise events, is to not just showcase local author and talents and get them in print and get them published, is actually find a way to navigate into this without the pitfalls of being taken advantage of by, and let's call them what they are. They're predatory companies, and some of them are just outright thieves. Like, I don't have a lot of tolerance for that. And
where it'll cost an author more to produce the book than they want to sell it for. Yeah.
There's no reason for that. And I do believe because the print technology is changing, gone are the days of the traditional publisher. I know they're struggling, and I don't want to sound like I'm poo-pooing on the traditional publishers. They still have their market, and there is avenues for it, but their structure doesn't lend itself well for the independent author. And I don't think it ever would. And there are other methods of doing it. Like, I'm not a fan. I wholeheartedly believe that you should be paid for work that you do. And that goes both ways. I've heard endless stories about traditionally published authors who their book retails for $20 and they make 20 cents on a copy. And I don't think that's right. I sit back and I ask the question, so from a publisher's point of view, what are you doing to earn that $19.80? And, I can tell you right now, because my background isn't print, it's not printing costs. So, there has to be a happy medium in there. And that's what I'm trying to strike.
Okay, so I think we'll move over into Love Catastrophe. I want to read a couple of early reviews, and then maybe we can talk about some of the other authors who contributed, naming the ones that are in the writer circle, of course, and the ones that are in Ottawa, if that's okay. So we'll start out being from North Grenville. It's a review from the North Grenville Public Library CEO, Rachel Brown. This collection captures an outpouring of emotion from a year of catastrophe and loss, interwoven through the themes of wildfire, pandemic, and hurricane. The poems are vignettes of sorrow, destruction, loneliness, and separation, but also with glimmers of hope for lovers of poignant poetry. And from Julie, we have Julie Ben. We have, there is so much of love in this collection, so much to love in the time of the pandemic, to abuse the phrase. In a period where we are bereft of touch and intimacy, love in all its forms encourages us to connect, and better yet, to hope. And as much as love hurts in touch, love always has the power to heal a very broken world. Love changes and changes with us with it, as evidenced in this marvelous collection of poems that encompass so much in so little space. So very good reviews. And can you tell us about the other contributing authors?
Yeah, well, actually, let me just read them off their names to you, because I should, but I don't remember them off all the top of my head. There's Bridget Brole, Kimberly Bowie, Summer Breeze, Cody Jeffries, Pooja Grover, Catherine Imblo, I believe that's pronounced, Samantha Page Mescal, Charlene McCorster, Josie Medina, Ian Prattis, Jen Pretty, Jagjit Sharma, Stephanie Shotton, myself, and Jamieson Wolf. Those are the ones that contributed to it. And there's the cover of it if everybody wants to see that.
Very nice.
Yeah, no, it's I was very happy with it. But the thing that really got the initial germ of the idea for me was, and as sentimental of a fool I can be sometimes, it was that song, If the World Was Ending Now, You'd Come Over Right. And I remember the first time I heard it, it really struck me because even in the video, it's not focusing on the end of the world, it's focusing on the loved ones. And, you know, let's be clear, I can tell it from my own point of view. When this pandemic first hit in March, the first thing everybody's mind went through was almost like movie level catastrophes. We were thinking end of society, collapse of everything we knew. Our imaginations were going everywhere with this. And for the most people I've talked to, myself included, was where's the first thought was everybody went with. There's usually this for the people you loved. It was not about survival or where are you going to get your food or where are you going to get your money or where are you going to live or anything like that. I mean, those things were still there, but the first thing almost everybody thought of was the people you loved the most. And that's important. I think that speaks volumes.
Yeah, and just a sidebar, because I want to get the North Grenville Writers Circle people. So Jen Pretty writes urban fiction. So I hope Jen can take me saying this, but there's probably some weird fiction in there. And then Jagjit Sharma is a poet. So that's very good that you got those two from our group. So how long did it take you from when you first had the idea for the collection and the date you published was very recently?
It was relatively quick. I can't remember when I came up with the idea, but it had to have been probably mid 2020. And I think I opened up to close where initially the submissions were going to close in October. And then I think we went into I don't know if it was the second or the third lockdown, whatever happened. And then so I extended it over Christmas until January or February. And then it was officially released on June 18th. So it was a relatively fast process.
Very good. And then trying to find ways to act, like you can't go to a bookstore because the bookstores are closed, but you probably have some scheduled now that phase 2 is opened.
Yes.
Have you started that? Yeah.
It's that beginning. I mean, I'm getting involved with the Richmond Village Market for this summer, and I'm going to be there almost every Sunday. So that was something relatively new. There was a pilot project that started at the end of last year to see if it could be done, and it was.
Can you name that again? It's the Richmond
Village Market.
Okay.
From 9 to 2, and it's at the Twin Elm Rugby Park on, I think, 4075 Twin Elm Road. So it's just outside of Richmond, and that's one avenue. It's a good place to begin with that. But you're right. Now that things are opening, Love Catastrophe poetry will be carried at, or by the time this airs, it will probably already be there at the chapters in Gloucester Center chapters. And then also the other thing too is all contributing poets got the copies of their own. So another avenue, if people want to get a hold of them, is get a hold of your favorite poet from it and they have copies, or they can go to their websites, and that I encourage people to actually get it through the actual contributors themselves, because this is all to get people's names out there is what this is.
Perfect. That's great. I love, from talking before, you know how much I love that. That's
Yeah.
great in line with how North Granville Writers Circle works as well. So if you don't mind, can you talk about what's next? Is there a new novel or a new poetry collection
There's
taking a break?
well, no, there's never a break, sadly. When I released Naros Journey in the end of 2019, it is the first book of a new series. It's probably going to be 4 or 5 books long. I've been saying that the sequel, the title of the sequel is going to be Invasion Scion. It's actually, the cover is actually in the end of the first book, so I've already committed myself to it. But it's been like 2 years now, and I haven't done. I've had somebody. I was on the radio a couple months ago, and somebody asked, "So how far along are you in Invasion?" I haven't done anything yet, nothing. But that's in the works. There's a couple of books that people have approached me to publish this year, so I don't want to say anything about them yet because it's not finalized, but those are in the works. They'll be coming out. And as far as poetry, I've been playing with it's complicated. I don't have it. It's, chances are it's going to be called The Burning of the Dross, and it's going to be a collection. It's going to be more commentary than poetry. I think there is going to be poems in it, but it's going to actually expand on a process of purging things from your life and exploring them and finding in depth about how things brought you to certain places. And then, as the title suggests, the burning of the dross is it's the cleansing is what it is. But the process is going through. It actually began with a poem I had submitted, I think it was last month, called Purgation. And it's, again, it's a darker piece, but it dwells quite deeply into some darker issues. And I think that's what may be in the works next. But chances are that's poetry tends to be a longer process, even though the end result tends to be a smaller book, just because you're really digging deep for stuff like that. It's not fiction. Now, to be honest with you, I've always get more frightened when I publish poetry than I do anything else, because with fiction, if somebody doesn't like it, I mean, I'm not happy with that, but it's just a story. It's not the end of the world. But when it comes to poetry, generally that comes from a deeper place. So I get a lot more antsy when I publish poetry.
I can understand that. Yeah. Yeah. It's great. Congratulations. You're going to be busy for a while, I think, eh?
Never ends.
Never ends. Yeah. So before we sign off, I just want to, as always, send my thanks out to the North Granville Public Library for their consistent support of local and regional authors. And to you, Michel, congratulations again on the release of Love and Catastrophe, a collection of poetry by Broken Keys Publishing. And to learn more about Michel Weatherall, visit Broken Keys Publishing online. Thank you very much again for meeting me here today, and we'll talk soon.
My pleasure. Thank you.
So now we're,